Picture a burning ship slipping beneath the waves, or a mound rising high over a chieftain's grave. From Tacitus to Ibn Fadlan, from Beowulf to Snorri, funerals in the heathen world were moments where the living met the mysteries of death. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast, where we discuss all sorts of things Germanic heathenry related. My name is Jesse. I am your host. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. We are live streaming across Facebook and YouTube. So, hail and welcome to all of you that are tuning in and watching this month's live broadcast of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. If you don't know, these are monthly live streams that I do usually at the end of every month on Monday nights. And if you ever miss one, that's okay because they get republished later on for that week's podcast episode. So, this will be replayed on my Patreon and elsewhere to all of you fine folks. So just a quick acknowledgement to some of my live viewers. Hello, David Klin. Good to see you again. Always good to see you pop in on these, man. Thank you so much for taking the time just to stop in and say hi. And of course, Patrick Walsh there at the beginning was chiming in. We'll be dropping in again soon. Hopefully, we'll see you again soon, brother. Thank you for your viewership and your support. Good to see you here also, and everybody else that might be silently watching in the background. Do be sure that if you want to catch these live streams every month, that you have turned on notifications for the appropriate platforms to be notified of these things. But I do schedule them out usually a couple of weeks in advance. And like I said, they're always at about the last or so Monday of the month and right around this time. So you'll see me pop up sometimes on your news feed with other things, clips from the shows of previous things or just various things. And if you want to follow along, it's greatly appreciated. One of the best ways that you can support what I do is to join my Patreon, which you'll see scrolling around the bottom of the screen. It is patreon.com/MidgardMusings. If you join at the Carl tier, which is $1 pledge, you get access to the video versions of this show that are not live broadcasts. So whenever I interview guests or record my podcast for the week, the video versions are only available in full on Patreon, and it's for just a $1 pledge. It's a great way to support the production of this show and show your support without burning a hole in your pocket with your well-deserved and well-earned funds. Also giving some acknowledgement, we got Nine Worlds Tree. It says, hello, hi, how are you? Thank you for tuning in and watching on YouTube. And we've also got here Sarah, hail and hello on YouTube as well. So again, thank you all so much for being here. We got a great topic that came in this week that we're going to be talking about from a Patreon supporter over there. He has been following along for quite some time, and his name is Michael. So Michael, thank you for this suggested topic for this week. Speaking of which, here he is, tuning in from Facebook. Michael Thacker, hail and good evening to you. Thank you again for this topic. And this is a topic that Michael had asked in our Patreon chat, which again, when you join Patreon and you have kind of like a direct line of contact with me through our community chat there. So again, it's a great way to support. You get some extra perks along the way, plus you get acknowledgments like this, and it helps with building content subject matter, right? So I will be happy to take your questions or comments if you have them. But what we're going to be talking about today are funeral rites, burial rites, things pertaining to those customs surrounding heathens, Germanic heathens. So this is a question that Michael wanted to have, talked about today. What's up there, Scald? It Works, good friend there. Blake over there at Scald It Works. How's it going, man? Good to see you. So as you all know, or maybe you don't, when it comes to these like questions or things about heathenry, I'm always keen on trying to find as many good source materials as we can find about particular questions, if any exist. And fortunately for Michael's question, when it comes to funeral rites and burial customs and things, right? One of the things about the customs of the Germanic people is that while burial customs or burial I don't want to say rites per se, but yeah, like the practice of doing what you do after a body has died, there's a lot of source material that backs up the processes. So we're going to kind of go into some of those things. I got a lot of notes, so I'm going to be looking back and forth just to make sure that I capture as much as I can. We're going to try to talk a little bit about some archaeological things, mostly literary evidence, such sources that are contained in the Eddas, poems, sagas, any other academic work that talks about these things. Um, but it's what's really interesting to note when it comes to the funeral rites and the burial rites of the Germanic peoples is that um, the concept of the belief of what happens after death, right? Beliefs about the afterlife are somewhat inconsistent. And by that I mean, you'll hear some mentions and some things in the stories that talk about, going to Valhalla, or being captured by, and going to Ron, if you're like in the ocean, or if you're in the sea, sort of thing. Um, Hell is a big one, of course, Hel, going to Hell's Hall, and all of that. So while the beliefs about what happens in the afterlife aren't always consistent across Germanic sources, how funeral rites were done and the funerals themselves are pretty consistent. They do have a lot of mentions in some very important source materials. And just as a side note, I'm not going to go too deep into what she writes about, but if you're ever really interested in exploring the complexities of a heathen worldview of death and the afterlife, specifically like the Norse and the Germanic views of things, there's a book written by H.R. Ellis Davidson called The Road to Hell. And it's a great source for you. It's an academic read, of course, but it's a great source. I highly recommend it. You can find free downloadable PDFs online if you're not wanting to buy the book, the hardcover book. I know a lot of people prefer that. A lot of people like to purchase and have a book on their shelf to reference. But if you're not, and you just like digital reads and stuff, it is a very extensive read. So it would be a very long, PDF that you would have taken up a lot of space in your digital storage. But either way, it's accessible. It's easily accessible. So it's called The Road to Hell. It's by H.R. Ellis Davidson. Very important reading material when it comes to understanding the worldviews of death and the afterlife among the Norse. So I always recommend that. But aside from that particular source, we're going to look at some source materials that are considered primary sources. Written from like the age of when Tacitus was observing the behaviors and customs of the Germanic peoples in his Germania. We'll look at some examples of other, we might call observers or external parties, such as Ibn Fadlan, when he has an eyewitness view of the burial of a Swedish of a Rus, of a chieftain of the Swedish Rus. We're going to talk about a little bit one of the most infamous poems in Germanic sources, the Old English poem Beowulf, because in that poem there's a very vivid description of Beowulf's funeral. And then, of course, we'll also make some references and mentions in the Eddas, right? Some of the Eddic poems, as well as some of the sagas. So, plenty of stuff to go through. So I think it would probably just be good to start with our earliest known sources. And you're going to notice a theme when it comes to what the Germanic peoples did to their dead. First of all, you know what I mean? Like how they would properly dispose of the body. In a lot of cases, you're gonna hear a lot of repeated themes. Okay. And that is cremation. Bodies were burned, cremated, and then the remains were done with what they were done with. A lot of times they were buried in a mound. Okay. Some of them were, and that burial mound could be, a family plot or a family, on family land, on old Isle lands. And then if you read H.R. Ellis Davidson's The Road to Hell, you'll understand why that custom was so important. It was believed that the part of the spirit of that dead person, that relative, that family member, by burying their remains on the family land, it afforded them the the ability to continue to protect and watch over the family. You know, so later on in the sources, when you read about things like Valhalla being a place for the warrior dead to go, and if you died at sea, you were taken up by Ron, and all of these sorts of things. These were more or less kennings. Valhalla, especially Valhall, were kennings to describe the place of the dead to go that died under those specific circumstances. It was, as an example, right? If a warrior died in battle, um, it was not practical or possible for their remains to be, picked up in the battlefield, brought back to wherever they were from, or burned and then buried in a family mound. It was impractical for that. So these warrior dead were said to be chosen to go to either Folkvagner or Valhall, right? So these were later concepts that became something that not necessarily early on believed to be a thing, at least from what source material that we know of, right? So where we're going to start with that is in Tacitus's Germania, okay? So this is again one part of Germania, where he says, in performing their funerals, they show no state or vainglory. This only is carefully observed, that with the corpses of their signalmen, certain woods be burned. Upon the funeral pile, they accumulate neither apparel nor perfume. Into the fire are always thrown the arms of the dead, and sometimes his horse. Arms meaning like weapons, right? With sods of earth, only the sepulchre is raised. The sepulchre meaning the sods of earth. With this, only with sods of earth is the sepulchre raised. Grave mound, right? No timber, no stone structure. This is sodden earth. The pomp of tedious and elaborate monuments they contemn as things grievous to the deceased. So they wouldn't raise these big tombs and monuments because they didn't think that it wasn't in alignment with their perception of things. Okay, tears and wailings they soon dismiss. Their afflictions and woe they long retain. In women, it is reckoned becoming to bewail their loss. We'll hear more about this later in Beowulf's funeral. In men, to remember it. So it was befitting and it was becoming for the women to sing a dirge or wail and do this over sadness, right? To this lament and this wailing. Whereas for the men, it was just be stoic and remember and not to cry and all this stuff, right? So this is what in general we have learned in the original and customs of the whole people of Germany. I shall now deduce the institutions and usages of the several people as far as they vary one from another, as also an account of what nations from thence removed to settle themselves in Gaul. So then he goes on and he talks more about some of the specifics of the Germanic tribes, but as a general rule, this was done with regards to a funeral pile, right? So they were accumulated and lit on fire, because it says into the fire were thrown this thing, that, and the other. So as early as what was it? Like 98 of the Common Era, so before the year 100, right? When Tacitus is documenting his observances of the Germanic tribes, we see early examples that cremation, funeral pyres, and stuff were the method adopted by the Germanic peoples. And again, it was once they were burned down, then the mound was raised, and their remains were put into the mound. All right. The other source, and I don't have like a written copy right in front of me to go, but if you look up Ibn Fadlan and the Land of Darkness, for those of you who are movie geeks and like the movie called The 13th Warrior, it has a very young Antonio Banderas in it. This is from I think the mid 90s or before. That movie, The 13th Warrior, is based loosely on Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness. His character in the movie is Ahmed ibn Fadlan, right? So he's an Arabic emissary traveling with the Swedish Rus at the time, and he witnesses a the ship burial or the funeral practices of a chieftain, and it's described as him being laid in a ship with belongings, things that were his. Even a one of his slaves was ritually killed and put into the pyre with him. She was given a hallucinogenic or mind-altering substance, so some sort of tea or something that she drank, and she was sexually exploited by the chieftain's men. It's a whole thing. Read about it in Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness. And anyway, this was another custom that was done by the Swedish Rus specifically for a chieftain. Very important person, has a high status in their society. So it's not likely that funeral customs for the common folk were done with such elaborate means, right? They're, having this substance, consumed by one of the slaves to alter their state of consciousness, and then they're sexually exploited and then killed and then placed in the pyre with them to burn during the cremation process. But that is a source, and that is, again, we see cremation being the method adopted by these people. Now, one of the most wonderful reads, and I'm going to, if you guys don't mind, I hope you don't, I want to read to you the line from Beowulf about Beowulf's funeral. The reason why I want to do this is kind of twofold. Firstly, it is one of the most vivid and famous heathen funerals documented in any sources, in any literature. Secondly, it follows the alliterative meter of poetry, of Germanic poetry, which I'm kind of a nerd about. So I love I love reading poetry that adopts that alliterative meter. Okay. So if you'll indulge me, this will probably just take a few minutes for me to read. It's a section of Beowulf, and this is the Francis B. Grummere translation. And you'll notice very early on what I'm talking about with the alliterative meter. Okay, and I'll do my best to maintain that meter as I read it. Okay, so here we go. Then the bairn of Veostan bade command, hardy chief to heroes, many that owned their homesteads, hither to bring firewood from far o'er the folk they ruled for the famed one's funeral. Fire shall devour and wan flames feed on the fearless warrior who oft stood stout in the iron shower, when sped from the string a storm of arrows shot over the shield wall. The shaft held firm, featly feathered, followed the barb. And now the sage young son of Veostan 7 chose of the chieftain's thanes, the best he found that band within, and went with these warriors, 1 of 8, under hostile roof. In hand one bore a lighted torch, and led the way. No lots they cast for keeping the hoard, when once the warriors saw it in hall. Altogether without a guardian, lying there lost. And little they mourned when they had hastily hailed it out, dear bought treasure. The dragon they cast, the worm over the wall of the wave to take, and surges swallowed that shepherd of germs. Then the woven gold on a wain was laden, countless quite, and the king was born, hoary hero, to Hrone's nest. Then fashioned for him the folk of Geats, firm on the earth, a funeral pile, and hung it with helmets and harnesses of war, and breastplates of bright as the boon he asked. And they laid amid it the mighty chieftain, heroes mourning their master dear. Then on the hill that hugest of balefires the warriors wakened. Wood smoke rose black over blaze, and blent was the roar of flame with weeping, till the fire had broken the frame of bones. Hot at the heart, in heavy mood their misery moaned they their master's death. Wailing her woe the widow old, her hair upbound, for Beowulf's death sung in her sorrow, and said full oft she dreaded the doleful days to come, deaths now and doom of battle and shame. The smoke by the sky was devoured. The folk of the waders fashioned there on the headland a barrow broad and high, by ocean farers far described in 10 days' time, their toll had raised it, the battle braves' beacon. Round brands of the pyre a wall they built, the worthiest ever that wit could prompt in their wisest men. They placed in the barrow that precious booty, the rounds and the rings that they rent erewhile. Hardy heroes from hoard and cave, trusting the ground with treasures of earls, gold in the earth, wherever it lies, useless to men as of yore it was. Then about that barrow the battle keen rode, Aelthing born, a band of 12, lament to make to mourn their king, chant their dirge and their chieftain honor. They praised his earlship, his acts of prowess, worthily witnessed, and well it is that men their master friend mightily loved, heartily love, when when hence he goes from life in the body forlorn away. All right. So let me just catch up there. So Dave is going to work, I guess. Yeah, time for me to get him to the plant. Have a blessed evening. Till next time. Thank you, David. All right. So there was the section of Beowulf that beautifully portrays everything in detail that really echoes what was spoken about in Tacitus's Germania. Hey there, brother. What's up, Adam Cage? Good to see you, brother. Thank you for tuning in and watching. I just finished reading the line from Beowulf of his funeral, to display and to show the customs of the Germanic people in how a funeral would be conducted or held. So much like what we read about in Tacitus's Germania, right? That his arms and maybe his horse were thrown in. So they threw things into the fire. We hear about, women weeping. They sung his dirge. They commemorated him. They sung great songs. This is a great example of what a heathen funeral would be like in ancient times, right? So it was again cremation, right? The body is burned. And the burial ashes are placed in a mound, right? So there's a very simple order to it. There's more to the story. I just gave you a section of it in the poem, but one of Beowulf's thanes, Wiglaf, he gives a speech, talks about how great Beowulf was. Beowulf's then his retainers then place him in the pyre. With all of his grave goods, all his weapons and the treasures and all of these things. His queen obviously is wailing and lamenting him, sings a dirge. The ashes are once the body is burned and completely rendered down, they are placed into the mound. And then once that mound was built, 12 warriors circle the mound to again sing songs, right, and commemorate their hero and praise their chieftain. So an example of the funeral rites of a very important person, highly esteemed, societally important, right? So, you got somewhat of a noble presence, right? So these are how things would be done for those types. There is some debate with whether or not there was ever like what we would consider a wake prior to the cremation, if the body was placed in view, um, for people to have uh, time with, to pay their respects to or whatever. There is a probability about it because even though it is not attested in any sources that we have available, um, there was a funeral that had a symbol documented in the Laxadela saga, which we'll get to shortly. But in the Laxadela saga, it portrays a funeral symbol. So symbol is a drinking ceremony. There's very specific pattern to what symbol is in the historical heathen sense. But when symbols are held is usually following a feast of sorts. And there is in the Laxadela saga, chapter 27, it was, the funeral of Hoskuld was a pretty important and lavish affair. He was an important guy. But it was done several moons after the actual funeral. So it wasn't like right then and there. It was something that was commemorated later on for him. So aside from these sources, you've got what's up there, Adam? We've got beautifully read. Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate that. Beowulf it's one of the most awesome poems that exist for heathenry. Even if you're not heathen, it's just a great poem to read. And again, I don't know if you could tell, but like the alliterative meter, the pattern of things, like with. Again, I kind of nerd out with that stuff, so maybe I'm just feeling it, but I love it. So, in addition to the sources that I've already cited, okay, so Tacitus being a primary source, Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness and his experiences with the Swedish Roof. This is around the 10th century, by the way, Ibn Fadlan. So, you're getting close to that medieval period, or in the migration of the tribes where they're moving north and stuff. But it's still it is a external person, not a Germanic person experiencing these things and documenting them as they see them. No bias. It is what it is, and a lot of the things that Ibn Fadlan writes about the Swedish Rus are not very complimentary. So there's that. It's truthful. All right. So then, of course, with Beowulf, that is somewheres around the 8th to 10th century of the Common Era as well. And then we get into the Eddic poems. Okay, so we have Gylfaginning. We that famously writes, talks about Baldur's funeral. Baldur is also burned on a funeral pyre, and then ends up in Hell, the realm Hell, right? Hel, not He double hockey sticks like the Christians say, but the Hell with the L, with the one L. So in Gylfaginning, Baldur's placed upon a ship. His body is placed upon a ship. His dead body is placed on a ship, and then that ship is burned. So here we yet again, even for the gods, for the holy, have a representation of cremation, of fire being used to dispose of the deceased. All sorts of things are burned with him. There are goods of, animals, possessions, even some dwarves get tossed into Baldur's funeral pyre. And there is this, the mythic reflection of his existence. You know what I mean? Because he was most loved, most beloved. Everybody mourned for him except for that one figure, right? We know about that. In Loki in disguise did not mourn for Baldur, which is why he was not surrendered. Okay, he was not brought back from hell. But that is a famous mythical story of another funeral that still shows the cremation, the burial goods, as being a means and a method of how the Germanic peoples would execute their funeral. All right. So some other material sources or source materials outside of these poems and the Eddas, right? So the Eddas contain myth and sagas. Let's look at a couple of other saga references. I mentioned briefly before the Laxadela saga. That is a 13th century source. So again, we're talking the late Viking Age, and it gives examples of, again, of Hoklother's. I think it was Hoklother. Am I saying it right? Hoskold. Sorry, Hoskold. His rather lavish affair, but he's again immolated, not cremated. It shows an airship, not airship, like not like Jefferson airship. I'm talking like air, like I inherited something, an air, HEIR, airship symbol. That'd be crazy, Jefferson airship symbol. That'd be cool, but not that. It is so. In anyways, the Laxadela saga, it records a burial and an inheritance feast. Okay, so the symbol, the airship symbol. His funeral does have a mound raised for him, of course, um, and it kind of it kind of outlines the I guess like social and legal I don't know, dimensions of funerals, who gets what because they're so important. You know what I'm saying? So all of these things that we're talking about, that we're hearing about, because they're documented in sagas, or they're documented in poems, or they're documented in myth, reflects the importance of the person that had this done to them. Right? Beowulf, this great king or chief, Balder, best and brightest, most loved of the gods. The folks, the signalmen, the chiefs of in Tacitus's Germania. We go again here now to the Ynglinga saga, which in the Ynglinga saga of the Ynglings, right, the kings of Sweden, who trace their lineage back to Yngve, mentions a funeral symbol as well in chapter 22. It says King Agne had at the time a gold ornament which had belonged to Visbur. This is a line from chapter 22 of the Ynglinga saga. He now married Skjalv, and she begged him to make burial symbol in honor of her father. He invited a great many guests and made a great feast. He had become very celebrated by his expedition, and there was a great drinking match. So one could say that at heathen funerals, symbol is definitely something that has been documented, and you could even say that there's a drinking match. So bring the booze for the for the affair, right? Groovy, man, says Adam Cage on Facebook. Yeah, it absolutely is, man. I love finding stuff like this out. Later on in the Ynglinga saga, there is a mention of a airship symbol. Okay, this is later on in chapter 40. Well, which is when Ingjald took the dominions and the kingdoms of his father, there was, as before said, many district kings. King Ingjald ordered a great feast to be prepared in Uppsala, and intended at that feast to enter on his heritage after King Onund, his father. He had a large hall made ready for the occasion, not less sumptuous than that of Uppsala, and his hall was called the Seven Kings Hall, and in it were 7 high seats for kings. Then King Ingjald sent men all through Sweden and invited to his feast kings, earls, and other men of consequence. To this airship symbol came King Algaut, his father-in-law, Ingvar, king of Fjaudnirland, with his 2 sons, Alf and Agner, King Sporfsnjal of Nerik. Listen, I'm not Swedish nor I'm butchering these names, so I'm sorry. King Sigvat of Atundan, is it Atundaland? Atundaland. But Granar, king of Soramanland, did not come. What a jerk! How you gonna not come to the king's feast, right? What a jerk. Anyway, so 6 kings were placed in the seats in the new hall, but one of the high seats which Ingvald had prepared was empty because Gronar didn't come. He must have had something more important to do. All the persons who had come got places in the new hall, but to his own court and the rest of his people he had appointed places at Uppsala. It was the custom at that time that he who gave an airship feast after kings or earls and entered upon the heritage should sit upon the footstool in front of the high seat until the full bowl, which was called the brega full or brega beaker, was brought in. Then he should stand up, take the brega beaker, make solemn vows to be afterwards fulfilled, and thereupon empty the beaker. Then he should ascend to the high seat with his father, which his father had occupied, and thus he came to the full heritage after his father. Now it was done so on this occasion. When the full brega beaker came in, King Ingjald stood up, grasped a large bull's horn, made a solemn vow to enlarge his dominions by 1/2 towards all the 4 corners of the world, or die, and thereupon pointed with the horn to the 4 quarters. So just imagine, right? He's got a horn, probably a drinking horn, I'm assuming, what it makes it sound like, and he's making these assertions, these vows of increasing his reign and his dominion by 1/2. So now, when the guests had come drunk, or had become drunk, towards evening, King Ingvald told Svithidag's son Gautvid and Hilvid to arm themselves and their men as had before been settled, and accordingly they went out and came up to the new hall and set fire to it. So they got them all drunk just to kill them. The hall was soon in a blaze, and the 6 kings with all their people were burned in it. So maybe Granar, who didn't come, maybe he kind of knew, I think what's happening here, right? He's about to get all these people drunk on his wine and his ale and stuff, and he's going to off them, right? Which is what so happened. Those who tried to come out were killed, and then King Ingjald laid all the dominion these kings had possessed under himself and took scat from them. So, big move there by King Ingjald. And Granar probably made the right choice by not going there, because he would have been among the other 6 had he done so. So this is a sumble, okay? Be careful, I guess, if you're going to have a sumble with relatives or with other people of importance following a funeral. Things could be said about that. So what does this all mean to us, right? Why are these things so important? As I mentioned early on in the episode, the beliefs of what happened, the beliefs of the afterlife, and the specifics of it, right? You go to hell, you go to Valhalla, you go to Bronze Hall, you go to Volkwagner, you go to here, there, and everywhere, right? It's inconsistent with many things. But what is consistent is the means in which the bodies are disposed of, and we see this in multiple sources already. So for us in modern times, if a heathen nowadays wanted to take on a practice or have, like, let's say, hey, when I die, this is what I want done, this would be one of the historically accurate ways of going about doing it, right? Having your body cremated. Prior to the cremation is the preparation of the body, okay? There is, I think it's the Gisla saga, talks about a figure who has died and is being dressed or prepared for their funeral, and the body. One of the things that the body has done is, first of all, they are dressed in their best clothes, the best garments that they had to put on ever is what they were adorned in. And in the Gisla saga, for example, were also put on hell shoes, or Hellskogar, I think is the name. I forget the Norse word for it, but it's hell shoes that allow them to walk the road to hell. You could So this is all very similar to the way modern funerals are conducted. If you think about it, right? If there's a burial, especially of a body, right? The body is prepared and embalmed, and dressed in good clothes, right? There's a suit or a nice dress or something that the deceased is dressed in, and the body is prepared for burial. Um, but in these cases, right, for the Germanic peoples, cremation is always the method. Um, we have some sources that might suggest a wake prior to that. You got to think about it, though, in ancient times, the practicality of that. There really wasn't, that we know of at least, the means of embalming a body to preserve it long enough to keep it out for a wake kind of a thing. So, but there could be that. And then, the funeral rite that is reconstructed from like Beowulf would be a really good, I say good meaning like a really good, like stable or strong means of passing this along. So have to go to Maine for a Viking funeral, Adam. Why is that? Why would we have to go to Maine? What is so special about Maine that we would need a quote unquote Viking funeral for, brother? Because if you're talking about like being placed on a ship in a body of water and having arrows, flaming arrows, set to the ship to burn you, there is provisions for that here in the state of Tennessee. And our brother Wolf is one of the responsible people who made that a thing. I'm sure he's talked about that before. So anyway, the funeral rite that's reconstructed in Beowulf, you have the eulogy, right? The prayer or the story or the meanie, as it's called, prior to, and in many symbols you have the meanie, like this prayer, this recounting of the person's date of their birth, when they were born, who their parents are, who is surviving who they are survived by, major events in their life, things of noteworthiness, and their accomplishments. So the eulogy is certainly a Germanic practice within the funeral rites. Placement of grave goods. Once the eulogy or the meanie is complete, you bring the heirs. Okay, so the family members, those who would inherit what the deceased has left behind, would come, and place anything that they would want them with their deceased to be buried with or burned with. So again, like let's say this is let's say it's a modern burial, modern funeral, right, where you've got a wake situation, right? The deceased wished to be buried, so they're at a viewing, whether it's in a church or whether it's at a funeral home or whatever. Bringing things for the dead, gifts. I've done this with a dear friend of my wife. Well, no, it's a brother, really. My wife's baby brother, not by blood but by adoption. At his funeral, he took his own life, and at his funeral, when we were there to say our goodbyes and stuff, I brought a gift, a grave gift, for him. It was a Mjolnir, and he admired it. Like, I remember him at one point. I didn't know him long enough to know whether or not he believed in heathenry or had any interest in following that path, but he always admired the imagery of the hammer, of Thor's hammer. And there was one particular hammer that I had that I remember him like saying he liked it. He liked the look of it. So that was the gift that I gave to him in his coffin, and I placed it with him in his hand to take with him. So this is, again, also very historical. In Egil's saga, the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, there's mention of certain figures like smiths, ironsmiths. Uh, these were important people at the time, but not as important as, let's say, the nobility. Yes, they would make tools and weapons of war and things that were important for the warrior class and the elite. So they may have had a higher than average status societally. However, when they would die, it is mentioned in Egil's saga that these smiths would be buried or burned or whatever with their smithing tools, their hammers and tongs and whatnot. Um, Clearly, we've seen like through Beowulf's funeral stuff that warriors were buried with their weapons, swords, spears, shields, whatever. Women. Okay, let's talk about that because we're talking about men and figures and stories that have a masculine representation. Women were even buried with important things too, according to their status. So we have volvas and stuff having their ritual attire that they were buried with, even spindles. Okay, things that have to do with the keeping of the house. It's been documented and shown through whether it's archaeological finds that women were cremated or sent off with items that were important to them in their household status. Yeah, they allow you to put a boat and set it on fire in Maine. Yeah, they do in Tennessee too. Talk to Wolf about that; he'll tell you all about it. Because he was I'll say a guiding force. He was on the phone with people, or so he says, uh, years ago, to get it done for a friend of his. Coast Guard, all kinds of stuff on the Cumberland. So it can be done. There's red tape or whatever that you got to get through. There's a process for it all if that's what you want to do. But it can be done. So again, once the grave goods have been placed, there is a dirge or a song sang, a lament, by a woman, by someone of the female gender. To a female relative will sing a dirge, a lament, a song, to express the sorrow that's being felt. And again, historically, that would be done by a woman. Then you've got the act of either burying the body or spreading the ashes. That's right. So, like in Beowulf, it took them 10 days to build the mound. Nowadays, obviously burials happen, within a week or less. So, even if a mound were to be built with modern tools and equipment, it would take, I'm sure, less than 10 days to do that. Once the body has been buried in the mound, or the ashes have been dispersed and whatever, then there would be songs of praise, right? Songs of singing of their, greatness, to and to circle the grave, right? To be in a circle. And again, talking about like Beowulf saga, or in the Beowulf in the poem of Beowulf there, where his 12 men would rode around and sung songs riding around his burial mound. Following all of that, you've got the feast, the funeral feast, bloat, sacrifice, whatever, and sumble. Of course, the sumble would be very commemorative of the deceased. Of course, a mini or prayer or anything, primary boast to the deceased would be included. That should typically be done by, whoever is the eldest or closest of that person who had deceased. Them being kind of like next in line, their status in the family societal structure, the eldest or the most closest to the person should conduct that part of the sumble. Then the braga beaker or the bragaful, as we talked about before, is the oath made on behalf of all the heirs, you know, uh, usually done by the eldest, who has kind of taken up that heirship, right? Taken up the position of the person who had deceased, right? So this is very specific, of course. Like, granted, we're talking about heirships, you know what I mean? So an elder of the family dies, whether it's the father, the grandfather, you know, at that point, the son is going to assume the responsibility of the head of that family after that figure dies. Um, so this is a traditional Germanic heathen process for these types of things. Obviously, not all funerals are going to be like that. They're not going to consist of those things. Okay. Um, but I think to talk about this and to bring into light with what Michael had asked, you know, heathen funeral rites, these are what they were. Okay. And this is the process that one could adopt or follow for doing such things. Once the bragaful is complete, right? It's then at that person's discretion to assume that role or take up the high seat of the deceased. You know, that torch, that flame, whatever, has been passed on to the person who has now assumed that role. Certain things about like this are not going to apply, you know. But I don't necessarily think that, like, to Michael's point or Michael's question when he asked it is why would you want to know about funeral customs or burial rites for anybody who is not close to you? You know, I wouldn't care what anybody else does that isn't close to me, or I'm not close to them. So I guess what we could take away from all of this, right, is that the practice of cremation seen across the board. Okay, there's even, and I don't remember where, but I feel like it's a law that got passed later on, like in the Franks, when the Franks were conquering the Saxons. I feel like they had a law that was passed to prohibit the burning of bodies, because the Christians recognized that as a pagan practice, and they wanted to outlaw it. They wanted to make it that the pagans could not, practice their ways. So if I find that, I don't have it right in front of me, but if I find that source, I will come back and annotate it at the show notes or whatever of this podcast. Because again, these live streams get put out later on, so you always can re-listen and re-watch. This will be airing on Spotify and everywhere for you to listen to this Thursday, and of course, will remain in video format on my Patreon on Thursday as well. So for that part of it, if I'm able to find that section of that law, if I'm correct, where the cremation was prohibited, it was outlawed, because the Christians didn't want pagan practices to be continued. It was an eradication of those beliefs in the lands at the time. I will add it down there to the show notes. So yeah, we went through a lot of things, you know. I think that pretty well covers everything that I had wanted to say. There were some, let's see. Okay, so we talked, you know, source material, right? Sagas, myths, poems, etc. The Eddas. What about archaeological finds? Like I mentioned before, there are some things in archaeology that we can look at that support the claims that we're making here, right? So, Sutton Hoo, Anglo-Saxon ship burial. Look that up. That is uh, continental. I guess you could probably say it's continental, but it's post migration, right? So the Saxons who migrated to Angleland, Sutton Hoo, right, Anglo-Saxon. There's definitely evidence of ship burial practices being done there. The Osberg and Gokstad burials, they're Norwegian ship burials again, so that's Norway. Sweden, there are cremation cemeteries in Uppsala, Birka, and Gotland. And we find plenty of, again, remains of well-to-do and or important, societally important individuals with grave goods. We talked about, like, with certain volvas being buried with their ritual attire, horses being buried with certain people. So or buried with their remains, because you got to figure, funeral pyres, yes, they got hot, obviously, but they weren't as effective as like a crematory nowadays. There's going to be a lot of chunks, skulls, bones, right? Obviously, things that are going to be left not completely consumed by the fire. So those remains that get found in these burial mounds have had plenty of things found in those sites that make it clear that that it was a burial site. So ships as a vessel, pyres as a means to cremate the body, but ships, the shape of ships, even when there's no water nearby, but ships as a vessel. This is very common and seen throughout Etic and other parallels within archaeology. The ship is the vessel to carry the deceased. So to place them in a pattern, or in the grave mound as or the place in the shape of a ship. Very historical. The pyres, of course. It was a important means of transformation. Transforming from one stage of existence to the next. It wasn't. Why go through all this motion? Why do all these things if this is the end for them? For the deceased. No, it's not. It's a transformation. It's a transition, and to ease their transition and to guide that transition from one stage of his existence to the next, these methods are important. So to observe that and to note that is important, I feel. Airship symbols, we talked about that before. Having the feasts to, again, any sort of familial inheritance that needs to be claimed or state claim to. This was an important part of the process. It solidified continuity of lineage. It honors the deceased in that way, as again referring to what we read about in the Ynglinga saga. What's up, Dave Rice? It says, indeed. Thank you for joining, Dave, the Black Wolf. Talking about funeral rites, burial rites, all these things. So I'm not sure. Just now caught your comment, and thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. But, again, the importance of the funeral, of that burial, was to transition, to get them to the next stage of existence. One of the things about, with the heathens is, we're not so concerned about death or the afterlife, to the point of doing things that matter for a reward later on, right? Everything that is done now is to secure our honor, to secure the honor, to secure luck, to preserve the flame, to preserve the fire, to preserve that which our descendants receive, both physically and metaphysically, and to once our physical bodies have died, to be transitioned onto the next stage of existence by our surviving people. Uh, that's where the importance is. We're not doing what we're doing to uh, make it to heaven or receive a reward in the afterlife or whatever. No, it's we just want to get to there. We're going to get there anyway. But it's the deeds and stuff that are done are to secure our reputation, our luck, and what is passed down and inherited by our descendants. So the claiming of those things, right, in the airship symbols, right, staking claim to that inheritance. It's part of the process. So, like, again, once these practices had become outlawed by the Franks initially, right? So Frankish rule, Charlemagne, he was a real asshole. Put laws in place to prohibit certain pagan practices, cremation being one of them. I'll find the source. I'll link it later on. I don't remember the Lex Saxonum, I think, is the name of the Lex Saxorum, something like that. It's Latin because that's what they were speaking in. They were leaving their native languages and adopting the church's Latin to speak. But the laws were to prohibit the use of cremation. So there was a shift at a certain point in history from cremation to inhumation in consecrated burial mounds or burial sites, church graveyards and etc. So yeah, any of the sources that I'm streaming this live right now. So a lot of the things that I talked about already up to this point are going to be added later on. Yeah, Ahmed Ibn Fadlan, Dave, I did reference Ahmed or Ibn Fadlan in the Land of Darkness and his eyewitness account of the burial and the funeral, I guess, probably more accurate to say the funeral of the Swedish Rus chieftain, everything leading up to that point, including the ritual sacrifice or the ritual death of his slave girl and how she was sexually exploited amongst his men and all this nonsense. So yes, that was definitely a source that I did mention early on in the show. But some of the other sources include Tacitus, some of the other sagas like the Laxadela saga, the Ynglinga saga, the Gisli saga, Baldur's funeral, Beowulf. One of my favorites in terms of the vivid depiction of how they did it or what they did. So, but yeah, thank you, Michael Thacker, for raising this question to me on Patreon and asking for it to be a topic of discussion. These are great opportunities for people that have not engaged with me before to engage with me. Right, we're streaming this live, so we got Dave Rice, the Black Wolf, commenting there. Yeah, what we do in life shapes our ancestors' place in the afterlife, which is why we pass our beliefs to our children so they can continue to lift the family station. It's about passing things on. It's about transference. That's what tradition is. It's about preserving the flame. It's not about worshiping the ashes. It's about preserving the flame, preserving the fire. And what do you do when you are no longer the fire bearer? Is you pass. There has to be that transition, and this is a rich and intricate part of our heritage. Many people's, of course. I'm not excluding anybody else, but in the Germanic sense, it is passing things along, right? Passing that fire, carrying this flame. Now this is your flame to carry, and teaching them and teaching our children and our descendants what that means. Guiding them through those processes and giving them the tools to be able to carry that flame themselves as well, because we're not going to be carrying it all the time. We carry it up to a certain point, and then we give them the flame to carry on. And it's about feeding that flame, right? It's about nurturing it. It's about being wordy warders of the Baal, right? Being giving those gifts to the ghostly halls. It's important, man. It is. It's intricate. It's the backbone, I believe, of our heritage as heathens, as Germanic people. But definitely, we see it echoed through the stories, through the lore, through the sagas. This is so much about what the Germanic peoples believed in, and what they held to. So how we continue to preserve that flame, and do so holistically, do so well to honor their memory, and to give our future, our descendants, something strong and something valuable and something beautiful to carry forth. Um, not isolated to hate and fear and bigotry or any of that nonsense. So, um, yeah, this is. I mean, this is one of those things where I feel you can the death cults and thinking about death and the afterlife. Again, it's not so much something that was focused on by our ancestors as a means of uh, earning some reward later on. It's what we're doing is shaping our place, you know, or shapes our ancestors' place and our descendants' place, So it is important, but we're not like dwelling on, well, what happens when I die? I mean, what happens happens. What happens while we're alive, right? Uh, that's what that's what really matters, right? Um, Dave Rice, Nostrand. Yeah. This is one of those things where punishment in the afterlife. So much of this show was focusing on funeral rites and burial rites, but how can you have that conversation without also including the concepts that came through, whether it be in later sources or not, about an afterlife of discomfort, even punishment, right? So Nostrand and Nidhogg and the these entropic figures, these monsters that get depicted in stories, in the myths, and Nostrand, right? The corpse shore and just where the dishonorable dead end up. I go back to right. We looking at like the earlier sources, like the Tacitus, right, and Germania, but also where the conceptual worldviews of the afterlife, very, very, I guess, deeply talked about through The Road to Hell, H.R. Ellis Davidson, which I mentioned early on in the show. Where did those concepts come from? The idea that there would be punishment to certain types, because one of the figure, like one of the types of people that get talked about being banished to Nostrand is the oath breakers and kinslayers, right? And they were outlawed in life. You know what I mean? Like they were like these were societal taboos. Um, you did certain things and you got yourself neathed. So did the idea or the concept of that transferring into the afterlife come from a pre-Christian pagan idea of that, or was it something that got brought into with the church? I think the latter. Hello, Lowland Sign. Hi from NYC. Native New Yorker like myself. Welcome to the live stream. Thank you for commenting. I was in New York, not New York City. I'm from Long Island originally, but I was in New York, Orange County, just a few months ago, back in July, to visit some family and stuff. So welcome to the show. We're just talking about concepts of death in the afterlife. The funeral rites has been kind of the chunk of this show this week. But yeah, Nostrand. I don't. Aside from that, like what other source material can we say had any place in affirming that worldview? You know, I feel like they believed that everything was, you did bad during life, and that was it. You know, you were outlawed. You were removed from society, from the cult, from the safety of your tribe, from the safety of the people, and you were at the whim of the wild, of bandits, of vandals, of any of those nefarious types. I said vandals, like funny enough, like vandal they are a tribe of Germanic people, which is where we get our word vandalism from, if I'm not mistaken. The Vandals were like kind of the go in and fuck shit up type of people. And that's where we get, our modern word vandalism from. Who else we got here? Hello, Skeetso. What's up? Says, hi, I've been here the whole time. Was just doing some things while listening. Awesome. Well, I recognize the screen name. So, Skeetso, thanks for tuning in and watching over here on YouTube. Believe I'm going to have you up on an upcoming episode in here in the coming months. Dave Rice says, that is correct. Okay. Well, yeah. So, thank you. I don't know what to say. Listen, I'm not a walking encyclopedia. I'm not a walking book. I remember certain things, and I know I've read or seen certain things from somewhere. So if I can't provide an exact source, that's not how my mind operates. I do try to have something if I know that I'm getting into the conversation. I do try to come prepared, like I did today with the everything that Michael had asked about with funeral rites, burial rites, and stuff. But it is an interesting thing to explore, right? With those topics almost go hand in hand. If you're going to be talking about death and the afterlife, then it would almost require you to include the notion or the idea of an afterlife for those who had lived dishonorably or had not retained their honor, had done things to lose their honor in life, and would that transfer to them and through death? Now, one of the transference things that I believe can be seen is that luck is transferable, right? The Haminya. So if the person who had died did things that were dishonorable, that they had lost their honor in death, that could be something that is fed into their the family's weird, right? Poured into the well and then inherited by the descendants. So it goes back to like what Dave was saying, is what we do is so important in life is just to give them good luck, strong luck, right? To live in ways that are honorable, because they will get all of it. They'll get the good and they'll get the bad. And if all we do is bad things and dishonorable things that are going to we're going to lose our honor in the process, our descendants inherit that. They got to deal with that. At least so far as what we understand the beliefs of the soul complex and what actually physically extinguishes versus what is transferred. There's different parts of the soul. H.R. Ellis Davis in The Road to Hell talks about this as well. It's a very complex thing, and it's a beautiful thing to explore, but the complexities of the soul and the Norse or Germanic views of that, what makes us who we are, our physical, our psychological, our spiritual, all of that, things that could be really given names to. Uh, Luck is one of them, the Hamingya, right? That inherited luck. So what is done in life may not be something that we have to suffer with in our next existence, but it is something that will get transferred to our descendants, and then they're gonna have to uh, address it or deal with it. Um, and that's a concept that's a worldview that is adopted by certain people. It might not be something you particularly agree with or find a place in within your beliefs. That's okay. I'm not trying to say that it should be, um, but it is a thing that is in place with um, the Germanic people. Okay, so um, yeah, I think that's gonna just about wrap it up here, guys. We've been going strong for a good, what is it, hour and 20 minutes. This is a solid episode, especially considering this is a solo run. So big thanks to Michael Thacker for challenging me to explore and research this topic and present some things for the listeners and for the viewers. This has been really enjoyable for me. I hope it's been enjoyable for you, um, the folks of you that have been listening and watching the live stream. Don't forget, I do these monthly, usually the last Monday of every month. So the next one will be at the end of October, whatever that last Monday is. I will schedule it and announce it through a Facebook event. But if you're only watching these on YouTube, I will try to do my best and get you alerted about that. But that's more on the algorithm and more on the platform for not having those interactive ways of announcing these types of things. But just know that these monthly live streams do happen every month. And the episodes, in case you missed the fullness of this episode, you can go back and rewatch it, I believe. But if you just want to ever listen, driving down the road, doing your job, I don't know, shaving your dog, or I don't know, feeding your possum, or whatever it is that you do, your chores, right? You can listen on Spotify. These episodes always get uploaded on those platforms later as well. What about the other parts of the self? Dave Rice says, apologies coming in late. Yeah, we didn't. So this show was more for the topic of the funeral rites and burial rites. We didn't really get into the complexities of the soul complex. So yeah, I mentioned the Hamingya. Okay. So you have the Huger, you have the Hammer. You have your thought. You have the physical body, the physical shell, your shape, the Huger. You have the Hammer. You have your wit, the mind. You have the Filia, your follower, that has been assigned to you from birth, and of course the Hamingya, the inherited luck. So yeah, there's multiple parts of the soul. We didn't get into that; wasn't the context of the show this week, but it has been something I've talked about in the past many times. Definitely might be worth revisiting. And these are Norse names of the of the soul complex, right? So the Huger, the Hammer, the Hamingya, and the Filya. And then we've also got Lolan says, I'll try to catch you next one. Good show. Thanks. Thank you for being here. And like I said, feel free to rewatch or catch me on any of the listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Amazon Music. I mean, I'm everywhere. Just whatever platform you're on, just search for Random Heathen Ramblings or Midgard Musings. Either one, you'll find it. The video versions of the show, besides the monthly live streams, so the monthly live broadcasts like this are only done once a month. If you ever want to watch any of the other video podcasts, please join my Patreon. You'll see it scrolling at the bottom of your screen. Midgard Musings, patreon.com/Midgard Musings. It's a $1 pledge. It's not a big contribution monetarily from your angle. $1, what's that? $12 a year, whatever. But it's a $1 a month pledge. You can do it month to month. You don't have to sign up for any more than that. But it is a great way to support the show and to support the production of this show at little to no cost to you. So I don't know anywhere that you can go and get get anything for $1, right? So I appreciate all of you that have showed up tonight, though. Dave Rice, great to see you. Lola, David Klenn, Michael Thacker, I saw you there before. Schizo, you've been listening, watching in the background there, commenting. Thank you so much. Patrick Walsh, I know you were there before. Adam Cage, two of my dear brothers. Sarah on YouTube. Who was it? Nine Worlds Tarot. A bunch of you all have been here and commenting and listening and watching. Thank you for your support. Check out the description area. Again, these live shows don't have a whole lot as far as that goes. But if you're ever looking to support what I do, just Google me, Midgard Musings, Random Heathen Ramblings. There's a Linktree link that's posted, so you'll find me there. I've got merchandise. I don't really talk about the merchandise because I've had some bad experiences with the production of that. But anywho, just follow along. I do have about 9 more episodes of season 6, 7 or 8 of which have already been booked with future guests. So in the next few months, you guys will be getting some guests coming on the show. My next live stream will have my dear brother, Patrick Walsh. He'll be a guest with me on October's live stream. So stay tuned. We've got some great stuff lined up for you to finish out season 6 of the Random Heathen Ramblings podcast. And yeah, you'll just find me wherever you want to find me. Instagram, YouTube, Google Plus, your sister's ass. I don't care. All right, guys and gals, thank you so much for your support. It's been great. Thank you very much for all of your continued and ongoing support. And until we talk to each other again, may the gods continue to notice you, and may your ancestors smile upon you. See you in the next one.